Hello, and thanks for choosing to listen to the Hired by Passion podcast. If you're listening for the first time, welcome. If you're listening for a bit, I'm really happy to be back after a few months of hiatus through the summer. I'm coming back, I think, in full force with an interview that I thought was really great. Today, I have Jeffery Shaw, and it's ironic that the guy who spent 30 years bringing life into focus as one of the country's most sought-after portrait photographers is now inspiring creative entrepreneurs to leverage their so-called lack of focus. Business coach and speaker Jeffery Shaw encourages entrepreneurs to use their natural creative strengths to build businesses that are profitable and fulfilling so they can make a career doing what they love. He's also the host of the popular business podcast Creative Warriors. A contributor to the Huffington Post, Jeffery is also the creator of an online trading program called the Creative Warrior Unleashed and has been cited in various publications and trade journals. I wanted to have Jeffery on the show because he's doing something similar to what I want to accomplish. So I thought, what better than to find someone who's already doing it? I think he had some great insights of what he called the dirty little secret. Talks about using fear as an indicator of what you maybe should be doing. And talking about knowing your why is not enough. You have to dive deeper than knowing why you're doing something to do what you're trying to accomplish. So I hope you enjoyed the interview as much as I enjoyed interviewing him. Without any further ado, here is Jeffery Shaw. So I'm here with Jeffery Shaw, and Jeffery, you're someone I discovered recently by looking at your Creative Warriors podcast that I thought was really interesting, and I thought it's something that's fairly similar to what I want to accomplish, and I'd really want to get you on the show. So thanks for agreeing to be here, and a pleasure to have you.
It's really my pleasure, Marcel. Thank you for having me as a guest.
So I'd like to ask you the first question that I ask everyone on the show, and it's when you meet someone for the first time and they ask you the question, what do you do? What's your answer to that question?
Great question. I don't tell them what I do. Actually, what I try to do is lay out a scenario that they might recognize. So I will typically say something like, well, do you know someone who's like super talented at something, but is struggling to create a business around it? And everybody nods their head yes. And I said, well, that's what I do. I'm a business coach, a podcast host, and a public speaker. And I speak on the topic of helping talented people transform their talent into business.
Okay. And if I ask you, what are you passionate about? Would that be the same thing?
No, because I can be passionate about so many things, right? I'm definitely fall into the category of being multi-passionate. I'm most passionate about seeing people grow. But you know what? That's how I serve as a coach. But I have to say, I enjoy that as a dad too. Okay. Seeing people grow. But that's what really lights me up and makes me passionate. And honestly, I can get off the phone and literally be jumping up and down. It's when you see somebody else really make that move forward.
Okay. Is there a certain event that happened that you realize like, wow, this is something I'm really passionate about and it's something I want to dive deeper into?
I hired my first coach in 1999, way before it was sort of common.
Okay.
So I guess I had the experience of kind of seeing it from the inside. So it was more of a slow progression. Then, when I started coaching other folks, again, you have the insecurity, the uncertainty. You're not sure if you're good at it. But at some point, yes, I don't know if I can say there's an exact moment, but there was a point when and I still feel it even today, that there's just that moment when somebody just really gets something. So yeah, I would say there was a time. I just don't know the exact time period, but there was a time that a switch really went off when I saw the magic of what I had received all along from my coach. But when I saw the magic of helping somebody else see that for themselves, that was a huge turning point for me. And I think it just lit me up in a way that I was committed to this for the long haul.
Okay. Something I find interesting is we haven't mentioned photography yet, but you've done, 30 some years as a photographer and got really accomplished doing work as a photographer as well. So I guess what role did photography play in your life growing up and to where you are today?
So I think like a lot of people, when it comes to passion, what my initial passion about photography was actually the transformation of what happened when you mix chemicals together, right? That's back in the days of dark rooms. So that was my original passion, more so than taking pictures, but I was passionate at the transformation. Surprisingly, not that different than the response I was just talking about as a coach, that almost mixing of chemicals, the mixing of elements, the pointing out blind spots for clients combined with giving them ideas. It's that same transformation that lit me up in the darkroom, lights me up as a coach. So that drove my initial passion in photography. But what I would say is the ride I have ridden for the past 32 years as a portrait photographer really is how I feel about being in business. In so many ways, photography is the tool for me to have the experience of being an entrepreneur, which is what I'm probably most passionate about, because I love the things that are fascinating about business. What the challenge of getting your message across to the right people, the psychology of what causes somebody to buy, the psychology of when somebody has buyer remorse. Like, I love all that stuff. So I'm passionate, I think, about the human experience of business more than the photography itself.
Okay. And that's kind of interesting because you've been interviewing a lot of people who are passionate about the creative side of their venture as well, right?
Yeah, it's we're all driven by passion somehow.
So how do you find that the passion for business versus the passion for creating differs in basically creative entrepreneurs?
Wow. In some circles of very close friends, and I guess I'm suddenly including you in that circle of close friends as well as all your listeners. Yeah. But I kind of call it the dirty little secret because it seems very kind of anti-artist to say that the most successful people I have met who have seen business success, everybody's going to define success in their own way, but those that have seen business success,
financial success in there,
success, but again, I even quantify that. I mean, it doesn't have to be business success may be financial for some people, but for somebody else, it may be the sense of the success of accomplishment.
Okay.
Right. But those that are driven by the passion of business, which their talent supports, will tend to be those that are most successful. And I said, it's kind of the dirty little secret because we like to believe that our passion for talent leads. And that's the balance that one needs to strike in order to be successful as a creative thinker or doer in business, or a creative maker in business. The balance that you need to strive for is the passion for what you do, but to have equal or even more so a passion for the process by which you can get that out there. Because without the business to support your passion at some point, if you can't sustain your life with it, you're likely to have to give it up.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And I wonder, I'd like to be able to help these creatives figure out how to do it. And in your experience with everybody you interviewed, what do you think are the steps that one can take if he is or she is passionate about the art and not the business itself?
Mm-hmm. I think the key thing which brought me into coaching, which is what my core message is to do business in a way that leverages your natural way of being as a creative person, and understand that fundamentally what traditional business has taught for all these years is not a natural way for us to be in business. We are not likely to be very happy in business if we're told to focus on one thing.
Okay.
I said right at the beginning, I am multi-passionate. That's not to say we can run amok, but to try to be in business and shut down your passions and other things is torture. And I've seen many creatives try it. It's ultimately why they say they hate the business side of it. Being an artist or a creative person becomes the excuse. And it's just because they haven't really been allowed to be in business or taught how to be in business in ways that really leverage their creativity. And in our community of creative warriors on the podcast and my Facebook group, Creative Warriors Unite, we talk about chasing squirrels. It's an ongoing joke with us because we creative thinkers always chase squirrels. And I support it to the degree that the squirrels are going in the right direction.
Okay.
Right. So you're not running amok, but it becomes, I will tell you, the work to be done actually is to get very clear on what you stand for, to get very clear on your core message and your purpose, if you will, and what it is, the work that you want to do in your life. The work to be done internally is to get really clear on that, because it becomes much easier to define whether some squirrels are worth chasing or not. And it's much, much easier to manage the multi-passions when you're really clear on where you want to end up.
Okay.
So we need to spend much more time on, the vision and get clear on that so that we can have a more fun and energetic, passionate course to get there.
Yeah. I'd like to ask you if you can elaborate a bit more on that, because it's something I read on your website and I wrote it down because I thought it was kind of interesting. And you mentioned how knowing your why isn't enough.
Right.
So I think everything you were talking about kind of relates to knowing your why, but in what way do you have to know more, or what extra things, baggage or tools you need than knowing your why to be able to follow those squirrels that go in the right direction?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I typically have to combat with the creatives that I work with, because they are so driven by passion, so soul-centered, heart-centered, that they in the equilibrium, they tend to be heavier on that side and less so on the business side. So getting the audience of people that I work with to know their why is a joyride for them. Like they love that soul searching part. But that's why I say, well, knowing your why isn't enough. I'll say 2 other steps after that, because I said they enjoy the journey to understand why they want to do what they do and why they think the way they do. The 2 steps after that next is to prove it to be true. And this is, as I will observe as a coach myself, that this is where I see a lot of coaches fall short, that they don't necessarily, they forget that one last step. It's like, somebody can identify their why, their purpose, what they're passionate about. I want to know why it's true. Okay. And it's the only part in coaching that I kind of ask people to retract. Coaching is not therapy, and I'm not into people figuring out how they need to blame their parents or whatever. Yeah. But it's an appropriate time to get meat to it, to understand, well, that makes sense to me. All the actions I've taken in my life, all the things people have said to me in my life, all the compliments I've received, the patterns of my life, the way I was raised, things that irritated me. I mean, there's a whole list of things that you can do that you want to have that aha moment of that makes sense to me. No wonder. Like no wonder is the phrase I'm looking for. When somebody understands their why, the next thing I want them to hear is like, well, no wonder that's what I want to do in the world. Okay. Like no wonder, because it's what drives me crazy, and I want to stop other people from encountering it. So no wonder. So that's the first step. And the second is that you have to apply it. So you have to get into action. And I think it's equally important to get into action and find your why. I'd say typically creatives will kind of dig for their why first because it's the journey they enjoy, and then struggle sometimes with getting into action. And what I like to stress is that you can actually find your why through action as well. Yeah. That I call it the 70%. It's because often, as you know, many people can procrastinate and get stuck on getting going. And I try to tell people, get it 70% there. Don't even strive for ready, whatever ready means. Just get it 70% there, maybe even 60%. Then get into action, because the rest of the learning about that will come from that. I'll give you kind of a humorous example. A friend of mine, looking for the ideal guy. She was going to a lot of therapy for counseling, and finally her therapist or counselor who she was seeking for dating advice said, you actually have to be out dating in order to learn the rest here. Like, it's true, right? You can't learn about how to be a good partner just in the microcosm of therapy about relationships. Like, it'd be a good idea to get out there and date.
Yeah.
Right. Same thing. Get out there and do. Yeah.
Yeah. I really like that analogy, actually, to think about. And I think that's a struggle for a lot of people, a lot of creatives, especially creatives that don't know exactly what they want to do. Because something I've learned in the interviews that I did with the people I interviewed is how a lot of people seem to stumble upon their passion, and they only stumble upon it by taking action on something else. So it's interesting on how they have like an inkling, an idea of something. Oh, I'd like to try this. I'd like to try that. And eventually they do. And then they figure out like small things about that they enjoyed, and one thing leads to another. And by taking more and more continuous action, they figure out what they're really passionate about. But it's still I like the chasing squirrel analogy as well, as because it seems that it's easy for the creatives to chase these squirrels, but often these squirrels are heading in opposite directions or different directions. So
they're often connected, actually, if I may, add to that. Okay. I was a photographer for 25 years before I became a coach. And I went through a very typical angst that I see other people go through. Like you try to keep these things separate, like you're cheating on one for the other, because we're led to believe that if we do more than one thing, we're doing things half-assed. Yeah. Right? I mean, we're made fun of as being jack of all trades. Right?
Master of none, right?
A master of none, instead of a Renaissance person, it used to be glorified in the 1400s to be a Renaissance person. And somehow that's evolved to the criticism that, oh my gosh, you're interested in more than one thing. You're going to do everything half-assed. You're going to be the jack of all trades, master of none. So when we have this multi-passionate, that's one of the internal battles that we're fighting. And so I was a photographer interested in becoming a coach, and really challenged by what felt like, cheating one on the other. And now I'm primarily a coach. I'm still doing some photography, but primarily a coach. And what I've come to realize is that it's not that being a photographer wasn't my purpose in life. It's not that it wasn't my passion and that now it's been replaced. The fact of the matter is these things are connected. As a photographer and as a coach, my life has been about watching people transform.
Yeah.
And I had the same experience as a photographer when I saw someone lacking confidence become more confident in front of my camera. When I saw families that have been disconnected reconnect in front of my camera. It's the same experience I see coaching people and speaking to an audience. So the experience for me is very similar. So the connective tissue all along, what I'm really passionate about is the transformation. So they maybe look like different squirrels to others, but to me, it's very connected.
But do you think you could have connected those squirrels together looking forward instead of looking backward, though? I think that's where lies the problem. Is it's easy for you to look back now and see how those squirrels were connected. But as you were progressing, feeling those squirrels were so different, how did you keep motivated in saying that it's okay and not saying that you needed to follow one or the other? Because at that point, they probably didn't seem connected, right?
Yeah, that's such a great point. I mean, for me, I started seeing the connection and granting myself permission to pursue it because of the level of work, internal work and personal work I do and the support I seek. But you raise a great point. Most people are not going to do that level of personal work. Therefore, they're only going to see those connections in hindsight.
Yeah.
And that's all the more reason why we shouldn't not chase the squirrel. It's all the more reason why we shouldn't shut down that possibility, because I will tell you, it's a life-changing moment when you look back in your life and you say, oh, it made sense. But do we want to live our lives in a way that we look back and say, gee, everything that everybody criticized about me actually turned out to be my greatest strength? That's why I do what I do. I'm trying to point that out on the front end. It's like, let's not let the world put creative thinkers in a box. Let's not let people continue old, outdated messages of, find a niche, do one thing, live in a box. We can encourage people and help people see it moving forward instead of in hindsight with people like myself and others that are doing this type of work.
So is there any way that you can think of or that you can suggest to people who are these multi-potentialites or who have all these multiple different creative avenues that they want to explore in, but at this point they're not a master or they haven't really found their voice, that exact place where they fit in that ends up being a niche in itself? Either you're doing a lot of general stuff, but putting it together creates your kind of niche where you can get noticed. But before you kind of find your voice and find that niche, it ends up being so general that you can't compete with any of the other ones that are already working in that field. You know what I mean?
I do. At the end of the day, though, it comes down to clear message, right? I mean, and by message, I mean, it's understanding your message, but then it's the portrayal of it. It's the brand image. I'm really big on tight branding, but you can only develop a really good brand when you've gotten clear on what you want your brand to stand for in the first place. One of the tools that we use is called a standout statement. It's a trademarked process that in a statement. It's kind of the modern day slogan or tagline. But a standout statement is a process by which we get really clear on what you want to stand for. And that develops into a brand that is the standout statement is like a tagline or a slogan, but it comes from within. You've already done the work to know what message you want to put out in the world that you want to stand for, that calls forward the right people.
Okay.
So the work to be done is first internal, but you have to then make it super clear. But to kind of enhance your point a little further, you just have to say life is not linear. You can do this work, get into action. Being in action is going to give you more information, which is going to slightly morph the message, and it's an ongoing process. So you don't have to be a master in order to begin the process. The mastery comes from the process.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I personally struggle with having, all these different ideas and different ventures that I want to get into. And it's funny how sometimes I'll delay action because taking action will somewhat give me more of an answer if this is going to work or not. And being in the unknown puts possibilities still there. This might possibly be what's going to work, finally work out for me. So I delay it. I delay it as much as I can sometimes because I don't want to know that there's no hope there anymore.
Yeah, it's funny. I call it the soul's gatekeepers. Like the closer you get to, and actually I use that as an indicator. I think fear can be an indicator that you're going in the right direction as much as it can be a caution to stay away. Okay. But I think more often, particularly if you are a seeker and as you advance in your career and in your life, I think more often fear is actually an indicator that you're going in the right direction. It may not be true if you're walking towards a cliff, but in the inward sense, fear can be a really good indicator that you're going in the right direction. So listen to that and pay attention to it. so that you can see if it's actually telling you the right information. Like I said, I often refer to it as the soul's gatekeepers, because it seems time and time again, the closer we get to figuring out what makes us tick, and the closer we get to figuring out what our next best move is, the more though that internal conversation gets flared up about, I'll procrastinate, I'll put it off. Okay. So I think the obstacles and the fears are often our best indicators.
Okay. So what do you think is the best way to get over this fear and stop the procrastination and start taking action?
You know, I created a meme the other day, put it on Instagram, and it seemed to be getting very popular. And the meme is that fear is rarely interested in your future. Right. It just, I mean, it serves a great purpose. So I think it's something you have to look at, but then put it into perspective that it's just not really interested in your future. So that's why I say it can be a good indicator that you're going in the right direction, because it's present. But I think the question I ask yourself is this holding me back from, my future? And if that's the case, then I think fear is serving as an indicator, not an obstacle. And I say, just, push through it. Break through that and be willing to take the risk, if you will.
Yeah. And it's interesting how much even if I speak just for myself right now, how I know that's true. I know I just need to push through it and do it. But yet it's the paralysis of everything makes it so hard to just say, okay, I'm going to do it, because it's going against it. Well, if I do it and it fails, then hope is gone. So what am I going to be looking forward to, or looking that maybe this is going to work out for me? So it is that click that even as much as it's still so hard to push through. And I wonder if there's just say grin and bear it and push through it is much easier said than done, right? So any techniques or tips?
I'd say, yeah. I mean, I think it's embrace it. Right now, you might have, hopefully now, maybe you and your listeners have a different perspective on it, that when fear shows up and it's showing up in a way that it's feeling like it's paralyzing you, but like, awesome, I'm glad this is here, because this is actually a great indicator this is the right thing.
Yeah.
And if it's not, it's not. I mean, I live by a very simple philosophy, which is make a decision and make it right. And, because I just have chosen for myself, and it's proven successful, and it seems to be the case for a lot of other success-minded people, is to not get hung up in choices, because it's just a choice. And if it leads you to make another choice, it's another choice. Yeah. So just, I am of the frame of mind that you make a decision, make it right. And which means, I live my way in a very committed way. I make a decision to, whether that's, move to Miami all of a sudden, or, any other choices I make in my life. And then, do what it takes to make that decision right. And if it proves not to be for some reason, if that fear, in fact, was right, which is pretty rare, then you'll know you did the best you could. Yeah. So I actually, I think there's a moment to celebrate how awesome it is when there's an indicator of fear that can be causing paralysis, and try to just shed some fun on it instead of feeling like it's paralyzing you.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's interesting how often these decisions, these seemingly so big decisions that you always wonder, should I not? And a lot of people spend so long thinking about that, but eventually if you do try it, the chances of everything going right, how much happiness, let's say, that's going to bring you, and the chances of everything going wrong and how much unhappiness that's going to bring you, usually the risk is so much worth the reward. Like there's so much more to gain than there is actually to lose, but it's hard to keep that in mind when you're staring that decision in the face.
Yeah, I think it's a delicate balance in entrepreneurship, which is to this is going to probably throw you and your listeners. And I know I've had some pretty in-depth conversations with one-on-one clients about this, is that, as an entrepreneur, as someone who wants to do big things in the world, you want to strive to give it your all.
Yeah.
And which is crazy, is not be attached to the outcome. And it's really hard to do that. I get it. It's challenging, but that really is what it comes down to, is to really strive for your best, but not be attached to the outcome. That doesn't mean you don't set goals. That doesn't mean you don't have an awareness of what you want the outcome to be, but to live your life in a way that you're not attached to the outcome, that it is going to define who you are, but to strive for your best and just not be attached to the outcome.
I think if you could take a pill and make that happen, everybody would be so successful.
Yeah, but wouldn't life be boring? And there are pills for that, I'm sure. At least temporarily. But this is the fun of life, though.
Yeah, no, I think because the reason for that is I think that you do your best work when you're doing it for yourself and for the reasons you believe is the best. and not because of the outcomes that will give it to you. For the when you're working for the intrinsic fun of or intrinsic pleasure of doing something, that's where I believe you will do your best work.
Absolutely. It's been proven.
Yeah.
It's proven in fitness, and people that want to get into an exercise routine for the extrinsic value of their body looking better tend to not stick with the exercise routine, as opposed to the intrinsic value of exercise, which is it makes me feel better, or maybe I go to the gym and I'm in a community of people. It's often the relationships that take place at a gym that motivate people to go to the gym more than the outcome of their body looking better, because there's an intrinsic value to relationship.
Totally agree with that. And especially even that exact example for exercise. To me, what makes me feel the best about exercise is how I directly linked how good I feel when I exercise and the opposite when I don't, how badly I feel. So
it's the same thing for the passion in our businesses, right? You want to have passion is intrinsic. So you want to follow that intrinsic passion for what you do. And actually, and again, another paradox is it's not to not focus on the money. Right. What I like to suggest is focus on the impact, right? Focus on the impact of your passion and trust that the impact will create the money that you're looking for. But those that focus on the money first, it's such an extrinsic value that it tends to not stick. They tend to not have the level of commitment, nor do they see the same level of success, as opposed to people who concentrate on the intrinsic value of impact and the meaning that they see in people's lives on the impact they create. And then the extrinsic value of money always follows it.
Yeah, definitely agree. And what I notice as well is how comparing with others is probably the most toxic thing you can do to hinder that. Like doing it for the money is when you see how other people are doing, let's say, similar things than you are, and comparing the success that they seemingly have versus yours. Well, then you're looking at extrinsic things, right?
And it's even more difficult nowadays on Facebook, right? Because everybody's life looks so perfect.
Yeah. And it's for myself to be productive on something like that and to do it for the work and to work on something that I'm, let's say, afraid of, or I'm staring the fear in the face of not knowing if I should go on with this or not. The best way for me was to make a checklist of what I wanted to do today and put it out in chunks that was easy to accomplish, to break down a task until it was really easy to accomplish, and then do those tasks, and eventually hoping to get to the goal that scares me right away. So I'm wondering, what kind of routines and schedules do you put to yourself to be productive every day?
It's actually somewhat similar to what you're saying. I always have a big vision. I know the vision for my life and where I want it to go. And that trickles down into, annual, I'll say goals, but I'm more along the lines, especially at this point in my life, I'm more interested in themes to a year. Like I look ahead at 2017, 2018 even, I kind of understand what I believe my gut is telling me the theme of that year will be. So, when I entered this year, the theme to me was going to be to expand on my platform, right? It just felt like that it felt like that's what was going to come along, that I was going to start getting recognition for the podcast and for the amount of content and articles I write. And in 2017, the theme for 2017 to me seems like a hockey stick year. Like that's the year that the years of effort are really going to take a quick shift upright. So in some ways, I'm kind of preparing for that. So when I look at my vision, I'm sensitive to what the theme of progress in my life feels like it will be. And then that often encourages some specific goals for that year. And while at the same time, I'm managing, day-to-day goals and weekly goals. I use an app for my phone that I really like for goal setting because I like the fact I can move things around really easily. Something doesn't get done today, as long as it can get done tomorrow, that's fine too. If I move it around 3 or 4 times, I've realized it's just not a priority for me, and I shift it all to a whole other list that when I can get around to it list. So I like to give myself a certain amount of flexibility in my routine. And then also I intentionally create some wins to make sure that there are things that I know are going to get done pretty easily. They might even be things I do every week on the same day. They become the fuel. What I recently learned from someone else, a productivity expert that I interviewed, which I thought was a really great advice, was to also acknowledge what you got accomplished. And it came right down to a preference setting in the app that I use, because like a lot of us, when things got completed and it got ticked off on the in the app or even on your piece of paper, if you're used to doing old school, what gets done tends to like disappear. We cross it off, or in the app I use, it literally, when things got done and I hit the check, it went away.
Yeah.
And what I learned from this podcast guest, this productivity expert, is that it's equally important at the end of the day to acknowledge what we got done so that we're not of the frame of mind of just looking at what didn't get done. My routine is really geared towards the positivity of getting things done. And more so that I see that how that can fuel us, and we can build on that and get better every day at accomplishing what we want to get accomplished, fueled by that feeling of pride of what we have accomplished.
Awesome. I enjoy those tips. And I see that as such a powerful factor of looking at what you've accomplished that day and not just looking at the things that you might have not gotten to, right? I think it's a weird balance in trying to overbook my day in a way that I know that I have a lot of things to do, so I try to do them all. And just maybe booking some that I know that I'm going to do, because if I continually see that I haven't accomplished everything I wanted to do, then it's demotivating looking forward, right?
Yeah, I said more and more so, maybe as I get older, but even as I coach my clients, I'm very much in favor of getting what we want out of life by making ourselves feel good and not through discipline.
Yeah.
It takes discipline of action. Like one would say I'm actually highly disciplined. I have a ridiculously disciplined calendar, right? There are certain days certain hours or certain days that I do certain things. And right now I'm writing my first book, and my discipline is I go to the ocean and I write between 3 and 7 every afternoon, which has completely shifted my whole calendar to accommodate that. So I'm very disciplined so that things get done, but not disciplined in a punishment sort of way. That I'm much more interested in suggesting that we all get done what we want to get done through positive fuels of confirmation and small wins.
Okay. So today, with all the information and all the personal development and self-help information that's easily accessible on the internet, I find it's probably easier to get into that, but at the same time, it's harder to sort through all the information or all the clutter that's there. But you've worked as a photographer for over 30 years. So when you were starting out as a photographer, did you already kind of implement these productivity things? Or how was it starting out and trying to find your place into photography?
I think and this is such an oxymoron, but I think one of the best things I did for myself was I kept myself a little isolated. And it was easier. To your point, it was really easy to do in 1982, right? We didn't have, remarkably, there was very little internet. It was kind of a new concept. Actually, was the internet even around? I think it was even around in 82. My father worked for IBM. So we were, in my household, we were always a decade ahead of reality because my father worked for IBM. And so we had computers in our house long before people even knew what they were. So I lose track of time. But, it was easier when there wasn't so much information to kind of isolate yourself. So I think that's still an important component, though, because by isolating yourself, and that doesn't mean be alone. That means don't just learn from your own industry. And don't just compare yourself to other people in your industry, and don't get caught up in over comparing yourself. I'm a huge proponent of cross industry innovation. I actually have a coaching group that is a small group of 6 people in different industries specifically for that reason. Like I facilitate that group so that people can learn from one another in different industries. So when I say isolate yourself, that doesn't mean be alone. It means what I think is even more and more necessary today is to enhance your filter of discernment. And it's a muscle. It's like a muscle that you need to build up, that you can decide what serves you and what doesn't serve you. And a lot of the influence of social media doesn't necessarily, if it doesn't serve you to go to Facebook and see your competitors or friends who seemingly are doing so much better than you, then don't go there. If it doesn't serve you, if you find it to be a struggle, when you look at the never-ending list of workshops and opportunities that are available to you, if you find it to be a struggle to decide which ones are best, then increase your muscle, your filter of discernment to figure out where is it best to apply your time, because there's just too many choices. That's such a huge challenge today. So I think, again, so often traditional business advice would tell people to focus. Right? That's what's wrong with you is that you can't focus. And telling a creative thinker or a creative maker constantly to focus is only making them feel bad about themselves, which goes against what I was saying earlier. Like we want to do business in a way that makes us feel good about ourselves. better. And what I do with my clients, I don't tell them to focus. I don't tell them to ignore what's in front of them. I do work with them to increase their ability to use discernment to decide what's to their advantage and what is going to serve them well. Because no creative person is going to shut down their peripheral vision. The reason creatives lack focus, if you will, is because we by nature have a broader peripheral vision. We need to take in more information to fuel the creativity. So we see, hear, and observe things that your more linear left-brained person is not even seeing. We see so much more. It's like a sixth sense in a way.
In the way that it's interesting, because I think in the end, you kind of need to be focused, right? Because you need to find your niche, or you not believe in that at all. Because I think by being general, you will eventually find something that you can make your own by being ultra niche, right?
I think again, if there's to be a niche at all, I think the definition of it needs to change a little bit. I think it's very limiting and heartbreaking to tell a creative thinker to find one thing to do and do that well and only do that one thing, right? So instead, let's focus, if you will, on what is it that you want to stand for? What's the work you want to put out in the world? And then focus and commitment can easily be collapsed together. And I think that's, you're going to follow with what seems to be a more focused way of being based on what you're committed to, right? So, I might seem really focused to people because I'm like, right now, one could say I'm really focused on my book. But I'm more committed to writing this book than I am focused on it. Because I'll tell you, when I'm writing the book, I'm also checking Facebook and Instagram and everything else. Like I know my brain needs that. I sit outside of the ocean and I'm taking in a lot of information, which is fueling my creativity. I don't write in an isolated room. I write in a public park with an ocean and boats going by because it's all feeding the creativity. But I have a strong commitment to writing it down. So I think sometimes commitment can look a lot like focus.
Okay. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think that's an interesting way of seeing things, and definitely a fresh perspective to think about. If you're, like you're saying, being told that you need to focus and niche down and do this only one thing and do it well, because maybe that's not the solution, right?
Yeah. I mean, as I said, it's sort of like, it's sometimes a phrase that's a little more common is pick a lane. Right. Yeah. I mean, and that's where the commitment comes in. It's not that that's the only lane you're going to see and that you need to focus on, but you might need to pick a lane and be committed to it. That doesn't mean you're not going to see other things and maybe choose some other passion or chase some other passions, but you do need to be committed in order to see a successful outcome.
Awesome. I appreciate it, Jeff. So if you had to leave a closing comment for people, in this line of work, trying to find their passion, work in their passion and turn their passion into a career, what would your last kind of tip of advice be for them?
It would be passionate about what you want to do so much that you'd be willing to do it for free, and then never do it for free.
Okay.
Right. I mean, I love passionate people, and I love the fact that business can be driven by passion. That's why I love working with creatives in business, because there's so much passion. So I love that driving. So you want to do something in your life that you enjoy doing so much, you'd be willing to do it for free, and then never do it for free. Get paid really well, sustain your life, create a beautiful life for yourself so that you can keep giving that amazing passion that you have to the world.
Awesome, Jeffrey. I really love it. So to close this off, if people want to connect with you and they want to know more about what you're doing, what would be the best way to do that?
Well, I'll suggest two things. I guess the first thing is, which a lot of people have fun with, is I have a 7-day online little mini course, very, very simple. It's called Week of the Warrior. And one can get that at weekofthewarrior.com. It gives a real sense of my philosophies. And that's, I think, why people enjoy that. And it's a fun thing to do. Okay. And then second to that is our community website, which is creativewarriorsunite.com. And that's where the podcast resides. There's tons of free resources. Even my suggested book list is there. So there's a lot of content there. It's the creativewarriorsunite.com is not about me. It's about the community of creative warriors.
Awesome. Really appreciate it, Jeffrey. And thanks a lot for coming on the show. I loved our chat, and I think there's always a ton of value to be gained in to listen to this episode. So thank you.
Well, again, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for sticking around till the end of the episode of the Hired by Passion podcast with my guest, Jeffrey Shaw. I hope you enjoyed the interview as much as I did. I thought I learned a lot from Jeffrey, and it's an interview that made me think a lot going forward in what I've learned in this interview. He talked about the dirty little secret. It's something I thought about a lot before as well, on how even if you are really passionate about something, if you're a really creative person, there's still a need to find that business sense and be good in business to be able to make a living from your art. The other way you can do it as well is to partner up with someone who's good in business and maybe use his expertise in business, your creative side, and have the partnership work as a whole. So you don't necessarily have to be great in business yourself, but I strongly believe that you have to be good in business to make any kind of venture work. So if you're not good yourself, find someone who is, and then make it work. We talked about chasing squirrels, and I'm definitely like that. I chase a lot of squirrels. There's so many ideas of things I want to pursue, and often I don't take action on those. And one of the big reasons I don't take action often is because to not take action gives me that glimmer of hope that it might work out eventually. But Jeffrey talked about the fear, having fear as an indicator. And sometimes when you fear something a lot, that's a sign that you have to go on that path. And I'm not sure if it's in episode 1 with Nikki Payne or if it's in personal conversations I had with her, but she told me the same thing, that often when she fears something, when she's scared of doing something, often it leads to great things. So I'm wondering if you guys experienced that before, or you gals experienced that before, of finding the fear and thinking that you were scared of doing something, but finally you just decided to do it and got great results from it. So I'd love for you to share that with me. In the end, Jeffrey talked about striving for your best and not be attached to the outcome. And that's something I've thought about a lot too lately. It's on how even when setting goals, when I set some goals for myself, often I think traditionally people set results goals. I want to do this by that time. I want to make this much money by this time or something like that. But I'm starting to realize that I think it's more and more important to set action goals, goals that mean for you to take action, whether I'm going to read X amount of time per day, I'm going to write X amount of time per day, or something like that. And the goal is the action, because you're really in control of the actions that you can do. But sometimes to say that you're going to make X amount of income, you are in control in some way, but in another way, you're not fully in control of that. And sometimes it can be discouraging if you don't reach these goals that may or may not have happened because of external circumstances. But you can definitely always control the actions that you take. And to have an action-related goal, or to have a goal that is action-based, I think is much more important than to have a goal that is result-based. So I think you have to do your best to strive to be your best, but not think about the outcome. Just try to steadily increase your productivity on the actions that you take, and I think eventually you'll find success doing that. Lastly, I loved his final quote when he said, "Find something you would do for free and then never do it for free." And that's a line that I've thought about a lot in past days. I'm currently doing radio as a volunteer, and it's something I really think that I want to do that professionally. So doing it for free, I'm making it a disservice of devaluing the time that I'm doing, or maybe accepting to do what I'm doing for free when I think I should be paid for doing that. So that's something I thought about a lot lately, and I think I'm going to have to take action on it, of not doing it for free anymore. So what are your views on that, on doing things for free? And I think to a certain point, I do agree that exposure is good. Experience is nice. If you're doing it for free and you're gaining experience, maybe you're not really doing it for free because you're gaining something from it. But at one point, I think you have to realize for yourself that doing it for free, you can't do it for free forever. If you do want to do that professionally, you have to decide to do it professionally. Like Marshall Button said, I think in episode 3, I thought it was such a great discussion on how you have to choose to be a professional and charge for your services. So that this line of find something you do for free and then never do it for free, I think is very important to remember. So I hope you gained as much value from this interview as I did. If you did, I would greatly appreciate it if you would share it with your friends, your family, your colleagues, or anyone who you think would gain value from this as well. I'd love to connect with you guys. You want to join me on the Facebook group? I would love that. You can find it on hiredbypassion.com and join the Facebook group there, or just connect with me, email, whatever. All my contacts are on hiredbypassion.com. So thanks a lot, and I'll catch you next week.